It was a rainy morning in Chicago. The busy streets mirrored the usual chaos of the city, with car horns blaring and people rushing to escape the downpour. In the heart of downtown, the Lincoln County Courthouse, known for hosting some of the most controversial and high-profile cases in Illinois, was even more crowded than usual. The tension inside the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lawyers dressed in designer suits whispered among themselves, flipping through stacks of legal documents. At the center of the room sat Judge Richard Coleman, a 62-year-old man, infamous for his strict demeanor and intolerance for procedural delays. With neatly combed silver hair, heavy-rimmed glasses resting on his sharp nose, and a permanent scowl deepening the lines on his face, he sifted through the morning's case files with visible impatience and skepticism. Into this charged atmosphere walked Marcus Reed. His entrance didn't go unnoticed. Marcus was a young black teenager, around 18 years old, wearing a plain dress shirt and scuffed dress shoes that had clearly seen better days. A worn-out black backpack hung from his shoulder, and though it seemed heavy, he carried it with unwavering grip. Despite his modest appearance, Marcus held his head high and walked with quiet determination. All eyes shifted toward him. Whispered questions rippled through the room. Who is this kid? What's he doing here? The contrast between him and the polished attorneys was impossible to ignore. Without reacting to the curious stares, Marcus took a seat on a bench at the back of the courtroom. Moments later, Judge Coleman struck his gavel, bringing the room to order. His voice boomed with practiced authority. We'll now proceed with the case of Peterson v. Greenfield Agritech, a land dispute within the state jurisdiction. I'll ask for the counsel representing the plaintiff to come forward. For a brief moment, there was absolute silence. Then Marcus Reed rose to his feet. With steady, deliberate steps, he made his way to the front of the courtroom. With every step, the murmur among the audience grew louder. Reaching the podium, he placed his backpack gently on the floor and addressed the judge with calm conviction. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Marcus Reed, and I am the attorney representing Miss Gloria Peterson. The room froze. The gathered lawyers exchanged bewildered glances. Judge Coleman paused mid-page, slowly lifting his eyes from the documents to study the young man now standing before him. Adjusting his glasses, the judge fixed Marcus with a stare that blended shock and thinly veiled irritation. I beg your pardon, did you just say you're representing Miss Peterson? This is an official court hearing, young man, not some school play. Where is the actual attorney? Marcus remained composed, keeping his voice level and respectful. Yes, Your Honor, I am Miss Peterson's attorney of record, and I'm fully prepared to proceed with her case under the law. Judge Coleman let out a short, humorless laugh that quickly turned into a sarcastic smirk. You've got to be kidding me. Who allowed this child to enter this courtroom posing as legal counsel? This isn't some playground where you pretend to be a lawyer. Let's be serious here. Before anyone else could speak, a voice called out from the back of the room. It was Gloria Peterson herself, an elderly woman with a gentle but determined presence. Rising to her feet, she spoke with firm resolve. He is my lawyer, Your Honor, and a damn good one. He stood up for me when no one else would. Judge Coleman narrowed his eyes, clearly disapproving, and banged the gavel to quiet the escalating chatter. Mr. Reed, present your credentials immediately. Without hesitation, Marcus opened his backpack, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to the court officer. As the officer walked the documents over to the judge, the entire room held its breath, watching every move with laser focus. While the judge examined the documents, the disbelief slowly faded from his face, giving way to genuine surprise. For the first time since Marcus Reed had entered the room, Judge Coleman addressed him without a trace of sarcasm. It appears your paperwork is legitimate. You're actually a licensed attorney. But tell me, young man, how did someone your age manage this? Marcus met the judge's gaze with calm determination and answered, through a lot of hard work and study, Your Honor, but I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to defend my client. For a brief second, Judge Coleman seemed at a loss for words, but soon he cleared his throat and regained his usual stern posture. Very well, since you insist, proceed with your case. But let me make one thing absolutely clear. You'll get no special treatment from me. Marcus gave a small nod, returned to the podium, and began arranging his notes. The room buzzed with murmurs and quiet disbelief, but Marcus acted as if none of it existed. He knew that today, he wasn't just fighting for his client. He was fighting to prove himself to every single person in that courtroom. Marcus Reed was born and raised in Westwood Heights, one of the largest and most overlooked neighborhoods in Chicago. He was the only child of Denise Reed, a resilient woman who had raised him alone ever since Marcus's father walked out when he was just a baby. Denise juggled multiple jobs. By day, she worked as a cleaning lady in high-end neighborhoods. By night, she picked up freelance gigs like copy editing and local reporting for community papers. She often left the house before sunrise and came back long after dark, her body drained but her spirit unbroken, determined to create better opportunities for her son. From a young age, Marcus showed he was different. While other kids played basketball on the streets, Marcus spent hours buried in books. Whatever his mom could bring home, whether they were discarded paperbacks or old encyclopedias donated by her clients. When he started at the local public school, teachers quickly noticed his sharp mind and relentless curiosity. Not only did he grasp new concepts quickly, but he also asked questions far beyond his grade level, always hungry to understand more. By the time Marcus was around 10, he had developed an extraordinary knack for solving complex math problems and an innate talent for persuasive writing. One of his teachers, Mr. Lawrence, recognized something special in the boy. Mr. Lawrence began giving him extra reading materials and challenging assignments far more advanced than the school curriculum. "You've got something rare, Marcus," the teacher often told him. "Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." At just 13 years old, Marcus entered a citywide essay contest and took first place, outperforming students from some of Chicago's most prestigious private schools. His winning piece, titled "The Right to Hope," tackled social inequality and the importance of fighting for justice in underserved communities. The essay gained local media attention, and soon a neighborhood reporter wrote a feature story about Marcus that captured the public's heart. That small article changed everything. Thanks to the publicity, Marcus was offered a full scholarship at one of the top preparatory academies in the state. But with that opportunity came new challenges he couldn't yet imagine. In his new academic environment, Marcus quickly became the target of prejudice. Many of his classmates, most from wealthy families, didn't hide their disdain for his background. As the only black student in his year, he heard more than once cruel comments whispered behind his back. "What are you even doing here?" one student had sneered. "This isn't a place for people like you." But Marcus refused to let those words break him. He knew he was there for a reason, and the discomfort he caused them was simply proof that he was challenging every stereotype they held. "It doesn't matter what they say," his mother often told him on the nights when she found him staring quietly at his textbooks, weighed down by frustration. "You're my pride, my genius, and you're going places far beyond what any of them can imagine." Throughout his school years, Marcus excelled in every subject, but there was one area where his passions stood out the most. He soon became president of the school's debate team, taking the lead in statewide competitions where he fiercely defended topics surrounding equality and social justice. It was during one late night, as he sat reviewing case studies and policy arguments, that he made up his mind. "I want to be a lawyer, Mom," he told her. "I want to fight for people like us, for the voices no one listens to." At just 15, Marcus earned a spot in an advanced academic program that allowed him to fast-track his education, completing high school and starting his undergraduate law degree simultaneously. By day, he attended classes at a public university. By night, he studied for hours at their small apartment, often until dawn, driven by a single goal: to make change. By the time he was 17, Marcus graduated with honors, receiving special recognition from the university for his outstanding academic performance. But even with a degree in hand, life didn't get easier. Breaking into the legal profession wasn't simple, not for someone young, black, and from a low-income neighborhood. He spent months handing out resumes, sitting through interviews where people barely looked him in the eye, always met with same cold, doubtful glances. But Marcus didn't quit. He knew knowledge and determination were his strongest weapons. He paused, then gave Marcus a longer, more measured look. "But tell me, how did someone your age manage to achieve this? This is highly uncommon." Marcus didn't falter. He drew in a steady breath and replied, "Your Honor, my mother always told me that with dedication and perseverance, anything is possible. I studied hard, passed every required exam, and met all the legal standards to stand here today. But with all due respect, my story isn't what's on trial today. What matters now is fighting for justice for my client." Judge Coleman took a slow, deep breath, visibly unsettled by the young man's confidence and poise. "Very well," Judge Coleman said, his tone sharp and measured. "If you're that confident, you may proceed, but let me make something clear. I expect nothing but absolute professionalism in this courtroom. Your age or background will earn you no special treatment." Marcus took a steady breath, turned back toward the podium, and began arranging his documents with calm precision. Every eye in the room remained fixed on him, some filled with curiosity, others with lingering doubt. But even under the weight of so many stares, Marcus didn't falter. He knew the real test was only beginning. From the back of the courtroom, Miss Gloria Peterson sat with her hands trembling slightly, but now there was something new flickering in her eyes. She understood that Marcus was young, but she also knew that he might be her only real shot at standing up to the powerful Greenfield Agritech. With the judge's permission, Marcus stood tall behind the podium, carefully spreading out his files. The room was still buzzing with quiet whispers, but he seemed immune to every distraction. The case in front of him was delicate and deeply personal. Miss Peterson, a modest elderly woman, was locked in a land dispute with Greenfield Agritech, a corporate giant in the agricultural industry that claimed ownership over the small plot where Gloria and her family had lived for over 3 decades. Marcus opened with a voice that was clear, direct, and filled with conviction. "Your Honor, today I stand here representing a citizen who has spent her entire life dedicated to her work and family. The property in question has been in Miss Peterson's possession since it was purchased by her late husband, and now it is being unfairly targeted by a corporation leveraging its power and influence to strip her of what is rightfully hers." He held up a document he had carefully marked in advance. "Here is the original deed to the property, dating back to 1991, which clearly shows that Miss Peterson and her family have been the lawful owners for over 30 years. Marcus began distributing copies of the document to the court, carefully explaining each technical detail with clarity. He referenced specific sections from the Illinois Property Code that dealt with ownership rights and fraud prevention. He laid out evidence showing that Greenfield Agritech had been manipulating records in an attempt to invalidate his client's legitimate claim. His delivery was methodical and sharp. He avoided unnecessarily complex legal jargon, but stayed technical and precise enough to command attention. Even some of the lawyers who had earlier laughed at him now found themselves leaning forward, listening closely. "In addition, Your Honor," Marcus continued, lifting another page, "here is an independent forensic analysis confirming multiple inconsistencies in the documents submitted by Greenfield Agritech. There are clear indications of tampering with the signature of the supposed original seller." He paused to let the gravity of his words settle over the room. "This evidence strongly suggests that the company's intention was to falsify documentation and wrongfully seize my client's property rights." Judge Coleman, who at first had barely disguised his disdain, now shifted in his chair, studying the documents with growing seriousness. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the papers carefully, then gestured toward Greenfield's legal counsel. The company's lead attorney, Philip Grant, a well-dressed man in his early 50s with an air of practiced condescension, rose from his seat. With a rehearsed smile and overly polite tone, he began, "With all due respect, Your Honor, this case is far more complicated than Mr. Reed is making it appear. Greenfield Agritech acquired this land through legitimate channels, and all documentation is properly filed and verified, Attorney Philip Grant declared, his tone dripping with authority. Casting a condescending glance toward Marcus, he continued, "While I don't doubt this young man's dedication, it's evident that his defense lacks the level of experience a case of this complexity demands. This isn't the time or place for sentimental narratives. We are here to evaluate concrete legal facts." Facts. Marcus stood silently, listening with steady focus, never once interrupting. When Grant finished, Judge Coleman shifted his gaze toward Marcus and gave a subtle nod, signaling that it was his turn to respond. "I appreciate the opposing counsel's remarks," Marcus began, his voice firm but respectful. "However, I must emphasize that what we've presented here today is not based on emotion, but on factual evidence. The documentation submitted to this court clearly demonstrates that Miss Gloria Peterson holds lawful ownership of the property in question. The irregularities found within Greenfield Agritech's submitted records are undeniable." A ripple of murmurs moved through the courtroom. Marcus's composed and direct response had caught many off guard. Without losing momentum, he pressed on. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we can't overlook the reality that Greenfield's financial influence is being used as a tool to intimidate and pressure an ordinary citizen, someone without the resources or connections to fight back on equal footing. This courtroom exists to uphold justice and protect those who lack the power to defend themselves against corporate overreach." Marcus proceeded to submit witness statements from longtime neighbors, all confirming that Miss Peterson had occupied and maintained the land continuously since the early 1990s. He also provided additional legal documents reinforcing her rightful claim. With each new point, he presented his arguments with clarity and unwavering conviction, as if he had spent his entire life preparing for this very moment. Attorney Grant tried multiple times to disrupt him with procedural objections and technicalities, but Marcus remained composed, countering each interruption with well-reasoned, legally sound responses that showed he had anticipated every challenge. Gradually, even the most skeptical observers in the room began to realize that this wasn't just a bright young man with a strong will. He was a thoroughly prepared professional. Judge Coleman, who until then had listened with an air of detached curiosity, began leaning forward, asking pointed legal questions. Marcus answered each one with precision, demonstrating not only a complete command of the case, but also a strong grasp of the legal framework necessary to defend it. "Very well, Mr. Reed," the judge finally said, clearing his throat. "I must admit, your argument is impressively well structured, but there's something I still need to understand." He paused, fixing Marcus with a sharp look. "If the property rights are as clear-cut as you claim, why did this case even reach the court in the first place?" Marcus drew in a slow breath, steadying himself before replying. "Your Honor, this case landed here because Greenfield Agritech used its influence and resources to create procedural delays and apply pressure tactics, hoping to force my client into surrendering her claim. But Miss Peterson stood her ground, and I'm here today to make sure justice is served." For a moment, Judge Coleman sat quietly, tapping his fingers against the bench. The air in the courtroom grew heavier as the crowd absorbed Marcus's words. A low murmur rose again, this time mixed with something new: respect. Even Philip Grant appeared unsettled by Marcus's unwavering confidence. But Marcus knew better than to relax. This fight was far from over. Capturing the court's attention had been just the first hurdle. Now came the real challenge, making sure the evidence was compelling enough to secure a win. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was electric. After Marcus Reed's carefully detailed presentation, every eye remained locked on the young attorney. He had done the unthinkable. He'd earned the full attention of Judge Richard Coleman and rattled the composure of Philip Grant, whose experienced defense now showed more tension than certainty. But the most critical moment was still ahead. "Mr. Grant," the judge said, his tone more neutral now, "the court will give you the opportunity to present any further evidence or to challenge what's been submitted so far." The room held its breath. Philip Grant stood slowly, smoothing his suit jacket and adjusting his glasses with the tips of his fingers. He paused, clearly choosing every word with caution and calculation. "Your Honor," he began, clearing his throat, "while Mr. Reed has delivered an eloquent, and I must admit, passionate presentation, let's not overlook the true heart of this matter. This case is not as black and white as Mr. Reed would like to suggest. At its core, we are dealing with the authenticity of documentation from both sides. And as we all know, establishing the legitimacy of such evidence requires a level of technical expertise and courtroom experience that goes beyond textbook knowledge." He turned and shot Marcus another patronizing look, clearly trying to provoke doubt or shake his composure. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Grant continued, "one has to wonder, is Mr. Reed truly prepared to navigate the complexities of a case like this? Or are we simply witnessing a well-rehearsed speech that lacks the substance necessary for real litigation?" The tension in the room spiked. A few audience members exchanged glances. All eyes now turned to Marcus. Judge Coleman shifted in his seat, then gave Marcus a small expectant nod, inviting his response. Marcus inhaled deeply, steadying himself, pushing down the emotion tightening in his chest. He knew this wasn't just about challenging his evidence. This was a direct attack on his credibility and his right to stand in that courtroom at all. It was a reality he had prepared for, one he'd likely face for years to come. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice even but filled with determination. "My role here is not to deliver rehearsed speeches, but to present factual, verifiable evidence. And the facts, irrefutable as they are, clearly expose significant irregularities in the documents submitted by Greenfield Agritech." He lifted one of the key documents and walked over to the projection screen positioned at the front of the courtroom. "If I may," he said respectfully, then pointed to the image displayed. "Here, we can clearly see the discrepancies between the signature on this deed and authenticated samples from the same individual. The differences aren't subtle, they're substantial. This isn't a minor error. This is direct evidence of document tampering." The room went completely silent as Marcus walked the court through each inconsistency with sharp, professional precision. His language was technical enough to impress the judge, but accessible enough for everyone present to understand the magnitude of what he was revealing. He referenced specific sections of the Illinois Civil Code, reinforcing that the document manipulation amounted to a deliberate attempt at fraud. "More than that, Your Honor," Marcus continued, turning directly toward Judge Coleman with conviction in his voice. "This case isn't just about paperwork or land ownership. It's about a fundamental principle of justice. My client, Miss Gloria Peterson, has dedicated her life to this property. She raised her children there, planted trees, nurtured the soil with her own hands. This land isn't just a plot on a map for her. It's her family's legacy, years of history, sacrifice, and love woven into every inch of it." Marcus paused, letting his words linger in the air, the weight of them settling over the room. "Your Honor," he concluded, "what's being judged here today isn't simply a property line. It's the dignity of an American citizen who turned to this court in the hope that the justice system would protect her." Judge Coleman rested his chin on one hand, his expression contemplative. It was clear he was considering not just Marcus's legal arguments, but the emotional and ethical gravity behind them. When Philip Grant attempted to speak again, the judge lifted a hand, signaling him to wait. "Mr. Grant," he said, "I'm giving both parties time to review the evidence one final time before I deliver my ruling. This court will recess for 1 hour." As soon as the judge exited the room, the murmurs erupted again. Conversations buzzed across the courtroom as people debated the strength of Marcus's argument. A few of the older attorneys, who had earlier laughed or rolled their eyes, now looked toward the young lawyer with visible respect. Miss Peterson approached Marcus, her hands trembling as she reached out to hold his. "Thank you, son. No matter how this ends, you've done more for me than I ever dreamed possible." Marcus smiled gently, squeezing her hand with reassurance. "We're not done yet, Miss Peterson. Let's see this through to the end." After the recess, the court reconvened. Judge Coleman re-entered with a stern, focused expression and took his seat. He struck the gavel firmly. After thoroughly reviewing the evidence presented and carefully considering the arguments from both sides, he began, "This court has reached its decision." The room fell silent. The authenticity of the documents submitted by Greenfield Agritech has been seriously called into question. In contrast, the plaintiff's evidence has proven consistent, credible, and well supported. He took a breath and then declared, therefore, this court rules in favor of Miss Gloria Peterson. Ownership of the property will remain in her name. A wave of reactions swept through the room, gasps, whispered exclamations, and stunned murmurs. Miss Peterson burst into tears, overcome with emotion, and threw her arms around Marcus in a tight, grateful embrace. For the first time since the proceedings began, Judge Coleman turned directly to Marcus, his tone noticeably softer. "Mr. Reed," he said, "I'll admit, when this hearing started, I had serious reservations about your ability to handle a case of this magnitude. But today, you demonstrated that skill and dedication can overcome any preconceived notions. This court thanks you for reminding us of the true purpose of justice." Marcus felt a swell of emotion rising in his chest, but he maintained his composure, nodding respectfully. He knew this moment meant far more than just winning a case. It was a turning point in his personal fight against bias and doubt. As Judge Coleman's verdict echoed through the courtroom, Marcus Reed's name was already spreading along the courthouse corridors, not just as a young, talented lawyer, but as a symbol of determination and perseverance. Miss Peterson, still wiping tears from her cheeks, whispered her thanks again, holding tightly to the hand of the young man who had stood by her when no one else would. "You didn't just save my house, Marcus," Gloria said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my story, my family's legacy. May God bless you, son." Marcus's eyes welled with tears, but he held on to his professional composure, offering her a warm, grateful smile. "Miss Peterson, your fight represents the fight of so many others. I only did what was right, and I hope to keep doing it for everyone who needs someone to stand by them." As he gathered his papers and began packing up his briefcase, something unexpected happened. Several of the lawyers who had barely acknowledged his presence earlier now approached him, shaking his hand and offering congratulations. Even Philip Grant, the seasoned attorney from Greenfield Agritech, made his way over with a noticeably humbled expression. "I'll admit it, Reed," Grant said, extending his hand. "I underestimated you. Today I learned a lesson I won't soon forget." Marcus shook his hand with humility and replied, "We're all here to learn, Mr. Grant. I'm grateful for the chance to represent my client." In the days that followed, Marcus's story began to circulate across local newspapers and social media platforms. Headlines read, "Young lawyer from Chicago's West Side takes on corporate giant and wins." The story gained momentum fast. Students from across Illinois and even beyond started reaching out, many of them from neighborhoods just like the one Marcus grew up in. One message from a young woman named Jasmine stood out. "Marcus, my family's going through tough times," she wrote. "There are days I feel like my dream of going to college and changing our future is impossible. But after hearing your story, I realized I can't give up. Thank you for showing people like me that it's possible." Marcus took the time to respond to every single message, encouraging each person to keep pursuing their goals and reminding them that education was one of the most powerful tools for changing their realities. Motivated by the impact his story had created, Marcus decided to take his mission a step further. He founded a program called Justice for All, aimed at providing free legal aid to low-income families and mentorship opportunities for students interested in the legal field. Partnering with local law schools and volunteer attorneys, Marcus began organizing workshops in underserved neighborhoods, places often overlooked by the justice system. He stood before rooms full of young people and adults, sharing not just legal knowledge. "I've been underestimated too," Marcus said during the project's first community event. "They told me there was no place for someone like me in a courtroom, but I proved that our place is wherever we choose to fight for it. I want each of you to know you matter, you're capable, and you have the power to change your own story. A few months after the Peterson case, Marcus received an unexpected phone call. Judge Coleman invited him to an event at the Lincoln County Courthouse. Curious, but with no idea what to expect, Marcus arrived dressed in his best suit. To his surprise, the courtroom was filled with judges, attorneys, law students, and community leaders, all gathered for a ceremony in his honor. Standing at the podium, Judge Coleman's usual stern expression had softened. "When I first met Mr. Reed," the judge began, "I had my doubts. I was skeptical that someone so young could handle the responsibility this profession demands. But today, I can stand here and say he's taught me something fundamental. Justice isn't measured by age, appearance, or background. It's measured by dedication, skill, and heart. This young man represents the kind of advocate we should all strive to be." Judge Coleman handed Marcus a recognition plaque engraved with the words, "For his unwavering dedication to justice and for inspiring others to believe in change." Wavering dedication to justice and for inspiring others to believe in change. Though honored by the recognition, Marcus knew exactly who deserved to see the plaque first. That afternoon, he returned home carrying a bouquet of flowers and the award in his hands. As he stepped inside, his mother looked up from the kitchen table and tears filled her eyes the moment she saw him. Miss Denise, who had been waiting anxiously for him, wrapped Marcus in a tight embrace, her eyes brimming with tears and her smile full of pride. "This is for you, Mom," Marcus said softly, handing her the plaque. She held it carefully, as if it were made of glass, her hands trembling with emotion. "None of this would have been possible without you," Marcus added. Denise smiled through her tears, looking at her son with love and admiration. "I always knew there was something special about you," she said, "but the most beautiful thing isn't just what you've accomplished. It's the heart behind everything you do. It's not just about being a lawyer. It's about why you chose this path." As the years passed, Marcus Reed continued to build a remarkable career, not just as a skilled attorney, but also as a mentor and a voice for the underrepresented. His story became more than just a tale of winning one case. It became a symbol of resilience, breaking barriers, inspiring change, and proving that talent and determination know no age, race, or background. In an interview with a national television program, Marcus summed up his journey with words that resonated across the country. "Justice for me isn't just a profession, it's a mission. And each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. My story, it's just the beginning. I hope it inspires others to keep fighting, no matter the obstacles in their way."